Welcome to the Inside the Box podcast, brought to you by Black Box Investigations and Appen Media Group. Dive into local issues important to the North Atlanta community, from politics and education to business and crime. Hear the story behind the story that you won't hear, read, or see anywhere else.
Hello and welcome to the Inside the Box podcast. I'm Hans Appen. This week on the pod, I had the opportunity to interview the Democratic candidate for governor of Georgia and the former minority leader of the Georgia House, Stacey Abrams. We covered a wide range of topics, including Medicaid expansion, foster care reform, and the state's growing trend towards diversity. It's a really informative show, and I certainly learned a thing or two. Here it is. All right, welcome to the Inside the Box podcast. Leader Abrams, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So a quick note for our listeners. We are recording this on a Monday. So this is the day before the statewide runoff. So we don't know who your opposition will be as of Tuesday night. But regardless of that, how does your campaign strategy change after Tuesday night? And does it depend at all on who wins on the Republican side of things?
The only change in our strategy is that we actually put a name in place of Republican. But we are not running against anyone. My campaign is about running for Georgia. We're going to continue to focus on the issues that matter to Georgia citizens. We're going to continue to have a positive message that really has a forward-looking identity, which is that Georgia can get better, that people who have not been a part of the progress we've seen in our state will have a chance to join. And it doesn't matter to me which Republican will be on the other side of the conversation.
Do you amp up efforts at all after Tuesday night?
Well, we're scaling. I mean, part of what we've been able to do for the last 9 weeks is really expand our reach, continue to share our message across the state. We will do even more because people are starting to tune in. And as we head into the fall, more and more people are going to realize an election is coming. November 6th is 106 days away. And so what we really want to do is use the momentum that we have had coming out of May to continue to propel us forward, but also scale up the number of folks who are working on our campaign. We were excited to have more than 700 volunteers a couple of weekends ago. We want that to be 1,700 and 7,000. And so really everything we do is going to get bigger and bigger as we get more and more folks to come together to make certain we win in November.
Which feels like an eternity away, but it's not that far away in reality.
15 weeks.
15 weeks. No matter who wins the Republican runoff, inevitably either candidate is going to run on a continuation of Governor Deal's policies. What is your message to an undecided voter who might think that, hey, I've enjoyed the last 8 years here in Georgia. Why should I switch my vote from a Republican to a Democrat?
I think you should vote for the best person for the job. And what I point to is that I have worked very closely with Governor Deal on transportation, on improving access to education, on kinship care, helping make certain our foster care rolls went down and that the number of families who could take care of kids at home went up, that we've worked very closely together on criminal justice reform, and that on major business issues, I have been a strong advocate, which earned me an A rating from the Georgia Chamber. But I've also received the Friend of Labor Award because I am the only candidate running in this campaign, regardless of who wins, who is focused on making sure that we're not only good for business, we're good for the people who work for these businesses. You want to vote for me because I understand that progress has not meant progress for everyone, that there are counties or communities within successful cities that have been left behind and left out. I am a civic leader. I have run small businesses successfully. I was a political leader, and I am the only candidate who has a truly bipartisan record that demonstrates that I will always stand up for my principles and my values, but that doesn't mean I can't work with the other side to get good done.
And you mentioned one thing that it's an important thing for me personally, my family personally. We've been fostering children for about 20 years. What types of reforms would you like to see in the foster care program?
And this is one area, again, where I will give Governor Deal credit. He has done more to invest in our social welfare system for foster care in the last few years. He's been willing to work with us to increase access. My personal focus has been on kinship care, families being able to retain custody of children even when the parents cannot. So we often think about that as grandparents raising grandchildren. Georgia has the 8th fastest growing population of these kids, more than 170,000 of them. And so working with Governor Deal, we were able to create a navigator system so that If you are a grandparent or someone who has a child, you're not going through the traditional foster care system. You just need information. You need to know where to go. Working with Governor Deal, we created a kinship care enforcement administrator because there was often a lot of intersection between the Department of Aging, because a lot of these are senior citizens, and the Department of Family and Children's Services, which deals with our kids, making sure they're all communicating. I want to make certain that we expand those lines of communication, that we increase our investment, and that we continue to adequately pay our social workers, decreasing their workload, increasing the depth of the work they do. But on the other side, for the kids themselves, and you know this, when you turn 18, you don't have the kind of family structure behind you. So we need to make sure that the state retains its responsibility, access to education, access to healthcare, access to mental health supports, because a lot of these children come from a trauma that doesn't just cease to be because they're 18, but also that we invest in their entrepreneurial efforts if they want, that we truly understand that in loco parentis, that we are a family for these children so that they have every opportunity to thrive.
Hi, this is Julia, and I'm here today to talk to you about one of the newest podcasts to join the Appen Media Group family, Myth Roast. Myth Roast is a comedy podcast about all things myth, or myth adjacent. I'm talking Zeus, Thor, Mothman, Icarus, Nessie, Frankenstein. You get the idea. Join me and my co-host Lauren every other Wednesday as we give not-so-serious retellings of our favorite myths, because those who don't know their myths are doomed to repeat them. Myth Roast is available on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We don't judge. And be sure to check us out on Twitter at Myth Roast.
Every generation of voters think that they're different than the last generation of voters. My generation is certainly no exception. But with that being said, what have you seen from young voters when you're out throughout the state, and what have you learned from those young voters?
Sure. So I'm Gen X, you're Gen Y / millennial, and we've got Gen Z. They are the ones who are coming of age right now. And here's what I think about. When I was in college, I was a youth organizer. I focused on youth civic engagement, and I argued that adults did not pay attention to the issues of young people, that they ignored what we needed and had become so distant from the immediate challenges of being a child or being a young person that they weren't giving enough thought to it. I think that's still true. It's just a different set of issues. That's one of the reasons I've proposed creating a youth council, which would take place within my first 100 days. Young people need to be at the table. If we're having a conversation about the environment, they're the ones who are going to pay the price if we don't do what we're supposed to do. If you're talking about youth incarceration rates, if you're talking about drug issues, if you're talking about economic issues and education, young people's voices need to be at the table. And in our campaign, we've already started this. We have one of the most robust internship programs, and we've got a lot of high school students as well as college students. But I've also hired a lot of millennials to work on the campaign who are in senior positions. In fact, one is sitting near us right now, my press secretary. Because for me, it's not just about hearing what they say, it's about giving them the authority to implement ideas. And so what I've tried to do is remember what it was like when I was 19, 20 years old, trying to get political leaders to listen to me. And I was privileged to have Maynard Jackson, who was the mayor of Atlanta, hire me to work for his Office of Youth Services. I want to create the same opportunity. And that's what I've done as minority leader. It's what I've done as a legislator. And it's what I will do in this campaign and what I will do as the next governor of Georgia.
And it helps them feel like they're a part of the process.
Absolutely.
And that their voices matter and that they can have some sort of effect on what their futures are going to look like.
Absolutely. And that's not just feel like it. I need them to be part of the process. Right. They have to know, because to your earlier question, I don't have their experiences. I didn't grow up with the kind of social media access, but also with the concomitant pressures that have occurred in the 21st century. I was born in 73. And if I think 73 is the high watermark of human society, that's a problem. So My mission is to make sure that we're always bringing voices to the table, not only diversity in terms of age, but even within those age groups, diversity of economic experience, of racial experience, of ethnicity, of language, so that we are truly reflective of the Georgia we're creating for tomorrow.
Right. And to that note, Georgia is a very diverse state. How does your strategy change when you're campaigning in, say, rural Georgia, and then you're coming up and campaigning in Metro Atlanta?
It doesn't. I'm very proud of the fact that if you take me at any given event, I talk about the same three things: educating our children from cradle to career, making certain we have a diverse and inclusive economy that thrives in all 159 counties, and making sure that we have effective and engaged government that works for everyone. Now, what I tweak is the nuance of what applies where you are. So if I'm in Dalton, then I'm going to have a conversation about manufacturing and what does it mean for the economy when manufacturing slumps. If I'm down in Ludowici, I'm going to have a conversation about how do we grow opportunities because those big companies aren't coming down there. So how do we use agriculture and agri-tech to grow jobs? If I'm in Southwest Atlanta, I have a conversation about Medicaid expansion, not because a rural hospital is shutting down, but because Grady Hospital is necessary for the health of that community. And how do we talk about those issues? So what I try to do is have the same basic framework no matter where I am. But I know Georgia. And so I know that if I'm in Southwest Georgia, I need to know to talk about agriculture. If I'm in Southeast, if I'm near the Altamaha, I need to know about timberland. I need to be able to talk about what happens everywhere in Georgia. And I've spent the last 11 years learning.
It makes it personal for them.
Exactly.
Okay. A lot has been made about the fact that if you win, you would be the first black governor of Georgia and the first female black governor in the nation. I know, right? And I know you've been asked about this a lot. I want to frame this, if I could, in just a slightly different context. And that's in the context that Hillary Clinton, when she was campaigning, didn't seem to really campaign on the fact that she would have been the country's first female president. She wanted to focus on the issues and what she thought were more important issues for the constituents here in America. You seem to sort of embrace this idea, though. Is that a reflection of anything that you may have learned in the Hillary Clinton campaign, or is that just you?
It's just me. I believe very firmly in transparency, and that means the transparent difference that I bring to a conversation. It is not a marker of my effectiveness, except to the extent that I've had a set of experiences that are different than the traditional experiences we see standing for public office in Georgia. And I will bring to the table what it was like to grow up as a woman in the South, as a black person in the South, as a black woman in the South. But it also means that I want people to know that I see what they see. We shy away from conversations about race and gender sometimes because we're afraid of what it means. My approach is this: you can see me. And if you can't see me, you'll probably hear about me. Mm-hmm. Let's acknowledge what is and contextualize what it means. You should not elect me. No one should elect me based on my race or my gender. But my race and my gender bring experiences that have helped me get to where I am and have shown me the challenges that people face based on their differences, based on obstacles and barriers. And you should know that as the next governor, I'm going to use those learnings that have gotten me to where I am to help remove barriers for other folks or to just understand the challenges that we all face.
A lot of my listeners come from the 6th District, where Jon Ossoff lost a close race to Karen Handel. What lessons have Georgia Democrats running in this cycle learned from that race?
So what Jon did, I think, extraordinarily well was expand who he spoke to and make certain that he was reaching beyond the traditional 6th District electorate. Because the 6th District, like the rest of the state of Georgia, has changed fairly dramatically since it was first drawn. My campaign is a statewide campaign. I'm going to every community, every county, and we were privileged in the primary to win 153 of 159 counties. That happened because I respect and value every single vote. I think Jon did an extraordinary job of that. I simply have to scale that. Mm-hmm. But the reality is the 6th District is a bit more homogenous than the state of Georgia. And what I want to do is make certain that every voice is brought to the table. But I've got a lot more room to work with than Jon did.
Right.
And so my plan is to win by engaging every single voter, meeting them where they are, understanding their needs, but believing that their capacity to lift their voices up is made stronger if I run the best campaign possible.
So it's a strategy that might not work in the short term in the 6th District, maybe in the long term, but you see it as a strategy that can work statewide.
I think it's a strategy that can work in the 6th District as well. I will say it's harder in the 6th District because it is gerrymandered to have an inelastic electorate. But the state of Georgia is extraordinarily diverse. Mm-hmm. And that diversity runs the gamut. It's economic diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, regional diversity. I win by aggregating the most votes possible. And I know that there are enough voters in the state of Georgia who share my values and who share my goal of having the freedom and opportunity to thrive, that we can amass the votes we need to win 50% plus one and become the next governor of Georgia.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, if you'll humor me for a second, I have a couple just kind of wonky policy questions for you.
My favorite kind.
I'm going to nerd out for a second.
Sounds like a plan.
A big part of your platform has been expanding Medicaid in the state. I think to your average Georgia citizen, they understand that that's a mission of yours, but they don't understand how exactly that happens.
Sure.
So day one, you're inaugurated as governor of Georgia. What's the next steps for actually implementing that change?
So the state of Georgia requires, because of law that was passed in 2014, that the state legislature approve expansion of Medicaid. My intent is going to be to introduce legislation concomitant with the budget of the state of Georgia, saying that the way we balance our budget, the way we do our job, is by expanding Medicaid. That is the first bill that I'm going to offer, and is the first and only bill that I will sign before we get to anything else. But here's why this matters. No matter even if you'll never touch Medicaid, actually everyone who plans to grow old in Georgia will eventually touch Medicaid, because Medicaid pays for nursing homes. It helps pay for health care for seniors. If you are disabled, if you are a mom who needs access to health care, Medicaid pays for a lot of things we don't think about. It pays for our rural hospitals, because what we call Medicaid now includes money for what are called rural extender dollars. That's how we fund rural hospitals. That's why Georgia rural hospitals have closed at such a frequency, because we forfeited those dollars. It also pays for poor people to go to the hospital. It's called the disproportionate share payment. We forfeited some of those DSH payments because we haven't expanded Medicaid. So even if you personally don't have Medicaid as your insurance, Medicaid is costing, our refusal to expand Medicaid is costing every Georgian money. We give away to Arkansas, Indiana, Kentucky, California, New York, $8 million a day. Now think about that. $8 million a day since 2014. Those are dollars that Georgia taxpayers have paid into the system that we don't get. And as a result, our rural hospitals are shutting down. The cost of insurance for everyone continues to go up, because we're paying for 500,000 people who get sick anyway but can't afford health insurance. And so as a mechanical fashion, my job as governor is going to be to convince Republicans and Democrats to come together and finally accept the money, and to know that this isn't a partisan issue. Indiana expanded Medicaid. Ohio expanded Medicaid. Kentucky. These are not liberal bastions of anything. So this isn't a liberal conservative issue. This is a math issue. Georgia has a lot of folks who need health care, and we've got a lot of money we're entitled to pay for that health care. And it is cheap and mean not to accept those dollars.
So is your plan to go into it saying that you'll refuse to sign any bill until Medicaid is expanded in the state?
My plan is to go into it saying that the priority of the state of Georgia is saving the lives of Georgians. And that first priority has to be met, because our budget depends on it. How do you make choices about the rest of the state when you are giving away $8 million a day? Mm-hmm. There is no good business person that would say that hemorrhaging money out of your bottom line, that you're giving away money, but we're going to buy new stuff. You shouldn't buy anything until you collect all the money you're owed. Medicaid expansion is the linchpin, because it also helps us create 56,000 jobs. So every bill that would come across my desk that's a job creation bill makes no sense if we're refusing 56,000 jobs in Georgia. Every bill that comes across my desk saying, let's help veterans, 25,000 veterans are being denied access to health care because we haven't expanded Medicaid. Education dollars. If we want to increase the bottom line for education, if we want to add mental health supports back into our system so we decrease our criminal justice rate, Medicaid expansion. It is the linchpin. And so for me, as a matter of smart policy, solve that problem, you can make all kinds of new decisions that help move the state forward.
And then my second sort of wonky political question relates to that. I think Georgia is one of 19 states that does not allow a ballot referendum by the citizens of its state. And I believe that's because of Georgia's constitution. Correct. We don't allow that. Is that something that you've thought about as any sort of campaign platform? Is that something you'd like to see changed?
I think that there is utility to ballot referenda. I think there is a question about how we do it. So you've got the sort of system in California where it basically costs millions of dollars every single year to go through the process of vetting whether or not there will be a ballot referenda. You've got other states that have a more constrained system where what gets to the ballot actually has already been vetted before it makes the ballot. And so you're not spending the next 10 years in litigation about whether or not it should have been put on the ballot. I'm absolutely open to that question, but I think if Georgia does it, we have to do it in a way that actually increases democracy, but doesn't increase litigation and costs. Okay.
You're the daughter of two ministers, and when we scheduled this interview, I actually talked to my minister, Dr. Ollie Wagner at Alpharetta Presbyterian. Mm-hmm. I said, what's the one question you would like to ask Leader Abrams? And I thought he had a great question. He said, outside of the politics side of things, outside of the campaign, what makes you cry? What makes you emotional?
Poverty. I grew up in a community where my parents were deeply involved in social justice. And this is before they became ministers. Then they were just preachy. But what they wanted us to understand is that there's a spiritual paucity to allowing poverty to exist. And it's not this esoteric conversation about people not having income. It's going to a public housing project and seeing kids who are crying because they don't know when they're going to eat again. It's working with the homeless in Atlanta. It is talking to a grandmother who has taken in 3 children because of the meth addiction of her daughter in Catoosa County, and she doesn't know how she's going to feed them and get them into school. Poverty is unnecessary. And we have taken that scripture in Matthew that says the poor will always be among you as an excuse. Mm-hmm. And what makes me cry, the only time I've ever cried in the legislature was the bill that we passed, and that they passed, because I fought it, that stripped a $5 tax credit from poor families at the same time that we created this massive tax cut for the wealthy. And I don't engage in the demonization of the wealthy versus the poor. That's not my point. My point was that there was this assumption that $5, $10, $15 didn't mean anything. I remember what it was like when I was growing up, when $5 was the difference between whether we ate or not, or whether the light stayed on or not. And it breaks my heart that we have become sometimes so numb to the reality of what it means to have nothing or to have too little. I want to be governor because that shouldn't happen. Poverty is emotionally crippling. It is devastating, and it is unnecessary. And it's a waste of human capital and human spirit. And that's the thing that drives me every day.
Well, last question. What's it going to take to beat the Republican nominee in November? And what message do you have for our listeners here in Georgia who would like to help your campaign?
I'm not trying to beat anybody. And I'm not being clever. I'm being intentional. When the campaign becomes fisticuffs between two candidates, the only people who get beat are the people, the voters, because their issues get lost in this back and forth. My campaign is grounded in a belief that we need leadership that moves the state forward, that sees everyone, that believes that everyone should have the freedom and opportunity to thrive. But that only happens if voters believe that they deserve that and turn out and vote. Democrats lose by roughly 240,000 votes, but we've got more than 1 million folks who have registered and voted before. They just don't vote in midterms. The governor of Georgia is the most vital part of ensuring future progress. We have had a governor who, in ways that I celebrate, has done a good job, but in ways that I am deeply saddened about, has harmed our state. And on issues of immigration, on issues of guns, we just have fundamental disagreements. But we've got a good platform in Georgia. We've got a good base. But we can do more for more people, and I want to be the person who gets that done. And if you share that mission, go to StaceyAbrams.com, sign up, call me, contact my office, volunteer, and make certain that you go to vote and bring 5 people with you, because if we do this, we will win.
Well, Leader Abrams, the Democratic candidate for governor of Georgia, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and best of luck the rest of the way.
This has been delightful, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
No, thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Inside the Box podcast, and thank you to Leader Abrams for joining us on the show today. If you like what you heard, please rate and review the show in the iTunes Pod Store. It helps other people find the podcast. And make sure to subscribe for more great content. Feel free to email us with any feedback at pod@appenmediagroup.com. That's pod, P-O-D, at appen, A-P-P-E-N, mediagroup.com. And make sure to vote in November. It's important.